Modern Warfare 2 introduced raids into Call of Duty for the first time with the launch of Atomgrad. Now this has been out for a while, and I've kind of just been, experiencing myself by playing it multiple times, and also just kind of gauge what other people were thinking about this raid. And one thing that I have noticed, which is a very significant problem, is that I don't notice many people like going back and replaying the raid multiple times over and over again. And honestly, I think that this is kind of a big problem because, I mean, raids are supposed to be Infinity Ward's answers to Treyarch's Zombies game mode, right? And it's supposed to be that. And you look at Zombies and people replay that all the time. People are still freaking replaying 10-year-old maps till this day, probably even older maps at this point. They're still replaying those over and over and over again. Whereas with this raid, I don't really even see people replaying it like almost 2 weeks after it came out. And this is a significant problem in my opinion, because it's just never going to be Infinity Ward's answer to Zombies if it's like that. If it's just going to be something people play for the first few days that's out and then maybe a couple times after that, then it's just not going to be that. They need to do something more. And sure, there's a lot of different areas we could look at for this, and in fact I've made a video going over absolutely everything I think that they should start aiming towards for their future raids in this game. But I wanted to make a video on one thing specifically, something that I think is so freaking necessary and was a huge mistake not to include with the first raid. And what this is a boss fight, because this is something that did not exist in the slightest. The closest thing we got to it was the final holdout step, where you had to protect a door for 4 minutes, and you just had to protect it from, regular AI and also drones, and then of course a couple of juggernauts that appeared here and there. And that was not great, if we're being completely honest. That's probably the low point of the entirety of this raid. It was just not a good step in the slightest. It's probably the worst thing we've ever seen, which is really saying a lot, because one thing I remember saying before the raids even came out is that what we can't have for the ending of these raids is to see something like we got in Spec Ops from Modern Warfare 2019. Because in that game, you had a final step, at least on one of the Spec Ops missions, where it was just a horde of AI juggernauts and a helicopter. And a lot of people at the time, and even today, will agree that that was a terrible ending for those. It's completely underwhelming. It's not a true boss fight, and it's just a sorry excuse of a boss fight. And unfortunately, that seems like exactly what we got for the raids all over again. I mean, this final step for the raid is probably even worse than that, because at least in that one, you had to also fight off a helicopter, right? But now, there's not even that. It's even less of a challenge. Like, the whole boss fight is just a couple juggernauts, right? Like, that's the most difficult part of all of this, and that is something that is just not good, to be completely honest. It's terrible, in fact. It's completely underwhelming. And to me, I just look at this and think, like, I mean, how much better would this raid be if it just had a final boss fight? And I really just mean just a final boss fight, because if we look at other raids from other games, I mean, they don't just have one boss fight. Normally they have multiple boss fights, and then you have the final boss fight at the end. But at this point, I'm even giving Infinity Ward way too much slack here by just asking for a final boss fight, not even the mini boss fights before that. Like, that's something that I think that if was included would make the raid so much better. Again, there are some other problems that I've made videos talking about, those other ones, and maybe I'll make videos specifically on those other problems too in the future. But to me, one thing that would help so much with the replayability, the most important thing of a third game mode for Call of Duty, would just be adding in especially a final boss fight, but maybe one day also some mini boss fights along the way. Because that is kind of the whole reason why we see so many people play raids in other games. And I think even if we want to look at Treyarch's Zombies game, it's kind of the main reason why so many people replay those Easter eggs over and over and over again. Like, if we're being completely honest, nobody really grinded out Easter eggs like they did until boss fights were added. And I really want to stress that, because I know some of you guys may be thinking like, oh, you add a boss fight at the end, like it's cool and everything, but it's not going to make people really replay it. But we have evidence to show the complete opposite. Like I said in COD Zombies, nobody really replayed main Easter eggs over and over and over again until Black Ops 3 came around. And what came out also with Black Ops 3, well, that's when they finally added in boss fights to it. So to me, I just think that it would really benefit the Raids game mode so freaking much if they just added in a final boss fight. And that's all I want to see out of the next raid we get from Infinity Ward. Whenever it drops, of course, probably going to be with Season 2 Reloaded, but whenever it does drop, that is a necessity. It cannot be what we got with this recent raid, which was just an onslaught of Juggernaut. I'm going to be blunt. That's terrible and completely unacceptable in my personal opinion. So to me, I think we need to at least see a final boss fight, and if they really want to take raids to the next level and actually have it compete with other raid games out there, like not even Destiny 2, like the gold standard, if you even want to compete with like the Division 2, you're going to need mini boss fights along the way, and of course it needs to have a crazy final boss fight. And then when you do that, and only then we could even start bringing Destiny into the conversation. But until then, Infinity Ward still got to just catch up to the Division at this point. So that's where we're at with raids in Call of Duty. Regardless though, I'd love to hear your guys' thoughts and opinions on this. Do you guys actually agree with me and think that boss fights for raids would actually make a big difference for the game mode, or no, not really, probably would be the same? Let me know down in the comment section below. Regardless though, that's going to wrap it up for me. If you guys did enjoy the video, definitely do all the normal YouTube stuff, like, subscribe, bell, share, and all that great stuff. But I'm going to go catch you guys in an extreme video, or whatever the heck it may be, and latest guys.